I recently started playing Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, the new sim that came out, and I was using my VR headset with that. And what's interesting about this is every time I take out the VR headset and use it, I realize that I just don't really enjoy using the headset. And the reason for this is because you can't really interact with your surroundings very well. It's not super comfortable. And even though it does deliver a very immersive experience, it's just not really worth the extra friction that is involved in getting it set up and going. So the VR headset, it's a great example of a piece of technology which I would have to say offers in some situations the absolute best experience that you will ever have, especially for something like Flight Simulator. And yet it's not necessarily the experience that I want to have, because it doesn't feel convenient in a well-rounded way. So if I wanted to sit down and load up my Flight Simulator and go on a virtual flight for an hour, well, I don't really want to do that with a brick strapped to my face. I'd much rather just have my 3 screens going and be able to drink my cup of coffee and interact with my surroundings and not feel like it's uncomfortable or in some way inconvenient to get it set up and going. So the purpose of bringing this up is just to say, as we talk about the difference between power and agency, the question is, what really is the benchmark we use to determine if something is the best for us? Oftentimes, things which are not necessarily technically the best at anything are in fact the best options in our arsenal because they're well-rounded. It's like, I've always liked the medium-sized Chevy Colorado pickup trucks, especially the 2003-ish era ones, because they had 4 doors. You could easily fit 5 people in one of them. You could haul stuff with them. Maybe not as much as a full-size pickup truck, but you could still totally put some plywood in there or haul a washing machine with it or whatever you needed to do. It got decent gas mileage in town or on the highway. Not the absolute best, but still, 27 miles to a gallon or something like that. They were just a great all-around, all-purpose kind of a vehicle. You could work with it, you could play with it, you could drive off-road with it or on the road, and you would never look at that vehicle and say it was the absolute best by any benchmark. If you want the best gas mileage, well, go for a smaller car. If you want the best carrying capacity, well, go for a bigger pickup truck. If you wanted the best off-road option, then you're going to go for something else that's beefier. If you wanted the absolute most top-tier passenger experience, well, you're not going to go for a pickup. But when you do all of the math and look at, well, what kind of a vehicle just all around is the best? Well, it's probably not the one that goes the fastest or the one that's absolutely top tier at any one thing. It's the one that you can just have an all around good experience with, no matter what you're doing. I think that we tend to sometimes get a little bit lost, or rather distracted, by trying to say, well, what is the best? And oftentimes, the things that are best for us are not the technical best in class. They're just the most adaptable. I was watching a video about Air Force One and the differences between the presidential airplane and Donald Trump's personal plane that he uses in his private life. And they're both pretty impressive aircraft. But it was pointed out that his private plane is a much more useful aircraft, not because it's better, but because as a private plane that is his private property, he can use it in a lot more of a free way. He's got the agency. He doesn't have to go through so many hoops to be able to just fly that smaller, more personal aircraft wherever he wants to go. Whereas if you're flying on the Air Force One, well, one of the biggest drawbacks to flying on it is that it is such a high profile, high security, technical engagement. It's hard to be able to do anything without being completely shrouded in red tape. So, like, what's better, right? What's better? To be flying on Air Force One and you've got a fancy airplane that's got mobile command center and everything you would need to confront an alien invasion or weather out the apocalypse in it, or a small personal airplane where you could just get in it and fly anywhere you wanted. Maybe one doesn't have as much amenity, maybe one doesn't have as much capability, but ultimately the one that gives you more agency, more freedom, more privacy is going to have an advantage. I think about people who are celebrities, people who have a lot of money. Oftentimes those people are very much in chains to their own success, because the fact that they are who they are means that they have to live their life in a very specific way. And if they don't, then, well, it's just not an option not to follow the path that they're required to follow. They're always being watched. They're always being followed. They're always being documented. Everything they say is something that's, you know, potentially under a microscope. And it gets pretty old, right? So what's better? A quiet, private life, low cost of living, not a lot that people really care about, you're off the radar, or to be that person where everything you say potentially is going to cause controversy. Everything you do is potentially going to be picked apart. You never know when you're going to say, okay, I want to go outside, I want to go for a walk, I want to go to the store or whatever it might be, and people are going to recognize you, and it's going to turn into some sort of a paparazzi kind of a thing. It's important to think about this because as we look at our lives, it's easy to be envious of other people. It's easy to look at what other people have or what they're doing and say, well, why is my life not successful like that other person? And when we do that, we often overlook the reality, which is that their life isn't probably better than ours, right? It's different. It's like the person who drives the fancy sports car. Like, sure, it could go 200 miles an hour. That's a good point. But it's not probably going to be a better experience because you don't need to go 200 miles an hour on the surface streets in town. Life is not about winning the top line. It's about having a well-rounded experience, which gives you a chance to live your life in a enjoyable and peaceful way. Rats are creatures that interest me because they're by no measure the most powerful creatures you'll find. A rat is very small, it's very weak, There's not really much to it. And yet, if you were to look at the success animals have, well, a rat will be able to survive almost any environment. Rats have proliferated through the entirety of the world successfully. They've found their way as stowaways on ships, and there's not really any place in the world where you won't find rats thriving, no matter how much they're killed or fought against by exterminators. They always find a way to survive. Meanwhile, look at lions or apex predators. And what you'll find is the apex predators can only survive in very limited areas of the world. They have to have a very specific environment. They have to have a certain type of prey. They have to have a certain type of climate. And usually the apex predators are actually the ones which wind up at risk of extinction, because they need to consume a lot of resources to support their existence. They are not adaptable. They're very vulnerable, even though they're very powerful. Whereas the seemingly insignificant creatures that no one cares much about, well, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So, what is it that really winds up giving us a good life? What is it in life that we should be thankful for? I think it's not really power. It's agency. It's being able to get up every day and know that the things that you're doing in your life are things that you're doing because you chose to, not because someone else chose the path for you, not because you were obligated, not because you were desperate, but just because that is what you chose to do with your life today. Learning to be happy with relatively little, to have a lifestyle of consuming relatively little, being content with relatively little, and not chasing another benchmark all the time, are good stepping stones toward a daily culture of gratitude, which will turn into the foundation for a fruitful life, whether that's a long life or a short one. And I think we should always be able to bookend our life every day and say, you know, if I have another few decades to live, then I'll take it. That's awesome. And if I don't, if we're going to just call it quits today and it's going to be the end and I'm not around tomorrow, well, ultimately, I had a good life. And if we can do that, then what is there really more? You know, what is there more to achieve in life than just being able to say that it was an amazing adventure, it was a cool experience, and you lived a life which was spent doing things that you chose to do, not things that someone else chose for you. It's true, sometimes you can choose to do things that other people want you to do, but there's a difference between choosing to do things that other people want you to do because you don't have to, but will anyway, and being a person who is always essentially the property of someone else. And that's maybe a testament to the importance of avoiding things like excessive debts. And I also think, maybe just as a side note, things like social media are something to stay away from to a point, especially because when you're always looking at other people and you're comparing yourself to them and you're comparing yourself to their projections, then oftentimes it becomes difficult to truly just say, well, what is it that I need? Like, what tool in the arsenal is going to do the best job of giving me the experience that I want? Instead of asking that question, we wind up asking the question of, what am I supposed to want? What am I going to need to do in order to keep up with the Joneses or to be competitive in the marketplace of social opinion? The reality is, most of the people who are out there in the world who will have something smart to say, some sort of a flex that they want to project, those people, they will disappear as quickly as they appear. There's a lot of people who act like they are interested, they act like they care, but the reality is they only care in so much and for as long as they are the center of the narrative. If they're able to advance or project their own power and do that while potentially investing in you as a tool to that end, then they will do that. But as soon as they lose the ability to prove that they are relevant, they will just vanish off into the woodwork, because they're not really interested in any experience. They're only interested in essentially the number. And that's like people who are, they'll play a game purely from a min-max perspective, and they're not really interested in the experience on any level whatsoever. They're only interested in it. They'll be very hyper interested in it as long as there's a number associated with it, as long as there's some discussion about, how high they rank relative to others. But they don't care anything about the actual experience of just being immersed in being present in the activity. The activity is not the point. That's not what it's about. It's just about the number. And being around that kind of people can be a toxic experience, because whether you like it or not, the truth is that whenever we start to surround ourselves with people who look at life through a one-sided lens, we start to become a little bit more like that ourselves. And that's not healthy. That's not good. So I definitely think letting go of people, letting go of all of those sort of superfluous things that sort of give us, I guess, an unrealistic expectation of what we should be doing with our lives or what we should be pursuing. It can be just not worth it. Like, that's one reason why lately I gave up social media, like Facebook, for example. And that's not because I don't like an online presence at all. It's that there's always these people, and they will be there to be curious. They always want to know what's going on with you. They want to kind of be out there on that outer orbit of your life, to observe and to sort of try to measure up and to have their 2 cents to kind of weigh in a little bit, or try to suck you into whatever their narrative might be. But ultimately, they're not doing anything for you. They're not providing any value. They're not contributing anything meaningful. And then if you're not careful, you can be sucked into it, and you start spending your time sort of scrolling through their opinions and making your own perception of life built on top of that, which is a bad foundation to build on. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think we too often live our lives on a basis of comparison instead of living on a basis of actual truth. And we could say, well, what is good, and then let us do that which is good. Or we could say, how do we stack up compared to our peers? And are we doing better than our peers? And if you choose the latter, if you're saying, am I just better than my peers, then you're going to just always have this attitude that doing what's right doesn't matter as long as you're doing a little bit more rightly than the person next to you. So instead of saying, why don't we clean our clothes, it's just, let's find the least filthy shirt in the laundry basket. And eventually, everyone is just living in filth while they pat themselves on the back and brag internally about how they're better than whoever it is that's one rung lower on the totem pole of grinding. Enjoy the life you have and do the things which add value to your life. And start by letting go of the things which ultimately may be comfortable but don't add any value whatsoever. And then ask yourself what it is that you truly want, what it is you truly need, and make a point to do something every day to pursue investment in those goals, whether it's a fitness goal or a relationship goal or a game you wanted to work on progressing through. Don't worry about all of the things that are always trying to sell you something. You know, this is Thanksgiving, so tomorrow will be Black Friday. I was looking at all of the stuff that will be sold on Black Friday at Walmart the other day, because it's been around, and working there, I see it. So, you know what was interesting to me? It was that I realized out of all the stuff that was there, ready to be sold, there's not a single thing in the pile of stuff that will be sold for Black Friday that I would take even if it was completely free. Why? Because if I wanted it, I would go buy it. I don't need it. I don't want it. So I don't care if the price is $0 or if it's $50 or if it's $500. If I don't want it, I don't want it. I mean, I don't need more stuff that I have to take to the Goodwill, right? So step back and just figure out what it is you want in life. Do something to achieve it. But it's a lot easier to take a few steps toward achieving something meaningful in your life when you aren't always distracted by all of the things that the min-maxers of the world will tell you you can't live without. I used to pay $300 a month for my cell phone. Why? I don't know. I just had like multiple lines and a tablet and a smartwatch and the newest phone and whatever. And then I thought, well, do I need that? And I realized, no, I don't. So I got a cheap phone and got the cheap data plan, and now I pay $16 a month. And you know what the truth is? I don't even notice any difference whatsoever. Same thing with my car. I have a cheap car. I don't care what happens to it. I rarely use it, usually just walk to work. And I pay $70 a month now, I think, for insurance total. And that's my complete total expense for a vehicle in a month. Compare that to a while ago. I used to drive a new vehicle that I purchased, and I paid, I think, $500 a month for the car payment, and then another $200 or $300 a month for the insurance. So it wound up being $700 or $800 a month just for my vehicle, right? So just, look at that. That's just a cell phone and a car, and I still have a vehicle that'll take me wherever I want to go, whenever I want to go there. Still have a cell phone, and it's $1,000 a month less out of pocket than it used to be. Like how much more easy is life with that extra $1,000 a month, right? But people will always look at that kind of stuff and they'll be like, well, why are you not, upgrading to the newest phone? Or why don't you have, a nice looking car or something? And that matters if you are paying attention to what they have to say. But it doesn't really matter very much when you don't even engage with those people or know what they're thinking. It doesn't really matter because they're just not even part of my circle, right? You know, my day is spent doing things that I enjoy doing what I want to do. And so when you start living your life doing what you need to do, doing what you want to do for yourself, it becomes a lot cheaper, a lot easier, a lot more attainable. And as a result, your life becomes a lot happier. So as we think about Thanksgiving on a day when quite often we associate the time with sharing our lives with an abundance of different people and immersing ourselves in their opinions and their traditions, maybe there's also something to be said for the importance of just embracing moderation instead of excess and tuning out the noise of all of those people who promise that their presence will make our lives more meaningful. In the end, maybe all we really need to be thankful is ourself alone. As always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.